I've been wanting to make a game, something short and fun, and I figured a mobile game would be the easiest. A simple physics-based puzzle platformer sounded interesting enough. Fast, snappy, with lots of destruction. Following the theme of simplicity, it would be a mostly linear game, with some puzzles as the main challenge besides basic navigation, and light combat scattered in to spice up the gameplay. Not too demanding and enjoyable in short bursts. The sci-fi setting seemed like a nice way of blending the familiar with the unfamiliar. You would play as an alien trapped in some research lab. Captured and tested on, you'd wake up and break your way out to freedom, fighting your way through whatever resistance the facility throws at you. This could be on an alien planet or a space station in orbit. That's about as far as I've gotten with the plot. I haven't nailed any specifics yet, so there's room to get creative. For now, I just need assets to play around with and figure out the mechanics first, since they are what will be the player's main means of interaction. Aiming for mobile comes with heavy constraints on what I can do. I could go with a 2D art style, but I still lack the experience to risk attempting that. Fortunately for 3D, there's low poly, a style that goes for appeal and simplicity. But I can't go full 3D either, since real-time lighting and shadows would grind performance. The alternative is 2.5D, a middle ground between 2D and 3D that offers a bit of both. We get 2D controls while keeping the 3D look, plus the fixed perspective is easier on hardware. All tools I'll be using are free, easy enough to get started with, and have plenty of tutorials. I want to focus directly on game design, so I won't be making my own game engine. In that regard, Unity seems like a decent option. It's beginner friendly and lets you get started right away. It has a dedicated asset store where you can get a variety of community built packages, both free and paid, that have tons of useful tools, features, and other resources. The core engine is written in C++, but it has a C# layer built on top, which is what we'll be writing all our code in. There are plenty of alternatives too. Unreal is used by AAA studios and seems to use less battery on phones, but it had abysmal mobile support back when I tried it, so I'm steering clear of that. Godot recently got Android support, so I'm not sure where that stands. At the time of making this video, Unity's license policy is that you have to subscribe to a payment plan, but that only applies if your yearly earnings exceed 100k, and it's free otherwise, which I think is absurdly favorable for solo devs and small teams. I don't know how Unreal and Godot handle their licensing, but you can check that out yourself if you're interested. For modeling and texturing all 3D assets, I'll be using Blender. Although it has both 3D and 2D animation support, I feel simple animations will be easier to implement in Unity directly, so I won't use Blender for that. There are community-made plugins that have more features, but those tend to only work on specific versions of the software, in my experience. Or if you know your way around in Python, you can try coding features in yourself. There's alternatives like ZBrush and SketchUp, but those are more niche. And personally, I'm quite content with this. I'll be using GIMP for creating textures and art assets. The interface is a bit obtuse, but it's pretty powerful. Switching softwares would mean relearning shortcuts, which I really don't want to bother with. Krita is very popular too, but for some reason it has marginally slower performance on my PC. Inkscape is another option, though I've never tried it. I use Linux, so I'll be using Visual Studio Code for writing all the code. It's decent, has plugins and customizations that streamline your workflow. Unity also comes pre-built with MonoDevelop, but I never got used to it. I'll be using Audacity for making audio clips and minor tweaks of royalty-free sound effects and music I find online. I tried learning music theory, but most of it flew over my head, so making music will have to wait until later. I wanted a simple and harmless looking player character, so I went with a sphere. Since the player will have physics-based movement, we can handle the controls in one of two ways. We could have on-screen buttons like most mobile games, or use gestures. Swipe in any direction to trigger dash, and hold down anywhere to brake. With some tuning, this start-stop motion should be enough to perform many complex maneuvers. As for the camera, I set it to always follow the player. There's other options like a fixed camera where all or part of the level is visible, or a cinematic camera that blends between the two as you move around. But a fixed camera limits the size of levels since you can only put so much on a tiny phone screen. And a cinematic camera sounds complicated, so I might revisit it later. I disabled shadows and real-time lighting, opting instead for static gradient lighting, which looks decent enough. For the materials, I used simple flat color shaders without any advanced effects. I used a similar flat color gradient for the skybox. To add a little flair, I added particle effects for when the player dashes and when they collide with any surface. I also added a simple trail effect so you can visualize movement better. Some background music so it's not too quiet, and a few sound effects for the dash and collisions. And for now, the player character is ready. If I were to oversimplify the basic concept of a linear game, it would be that you begin with a map, have a start, an end, things of interest along the way, and a single path that guides you through the whole thing. Some people use the term set piece to refer to these sorts of maps. Then, by weaving together many such maps, we can form a complete experience. Depending on what set pieces you use and how they're spaced, you can establish the game space. There are still things I need to figure out before I move on to designing levels proper. So right now, I'll make only one dummy map where I can test rear movement and other core mechanics. To keep things even simpler and consistent, I'll use a grid-based design. Having modular pieces also makes it easier to modify things later on. To compose levels, I've narrowed down 6 broad categories of objects I'll be needing. Up first are immovable, indestructible objects that will define the outline for a level. These static objects include walls, floors, and platforms. Next are objects acting as minor obstacles. These provide basic interactivity in the form of destruction. Crates and windows fall in this category. Then come the actual interactive objects, providing a variety of mechanisms and methods by which to trigger them. Think of doors and switches. Fourth are inanimate things in the environment that harm the player when nearby or in contact with them. Electric fences and acid pools fit this bill. Now come the animate objects that pose a threat and may actively seek out to harm the player. Examples include turrets and soldiers. Finally, we have non-interactive objects that provide visual flair and serve as storytelling elements. These can be anything added to the background and foreground that the player can't reach. Stepping back, I designed a small level that's simple and varied, with winding turns, long corridors, and open areas for free movement. To populate this level, I'll start with the most basic things, which are breakable objects. Crates are fun to thrash around and can be broken apart with enough abuse. These serve as minor obstructions and as a means of teaching the player how their actions affect objects in the environment. Windows are minor obstacles that can be smashed through or avoided when possible. They could pose a decision by hiding optional paths or shortcuts in time-critical situations. Barrels are similar to crates, but they're tougher and explode when broken. They can be used offensively to clear paths quickly or hurt enemies in groups. Next, for interactive objects, I drew up a few mechanisms focusing on variation in design, function, and how they engage the player. Buttons and switches perform the same function, but are activated slightly differently. One is large and easy to hit, while the other needs a bit more dexterity. These will mainly be used to trigger other mechanisms only once or repeatedly. There are 2 versions of the wind-up mechanism, one requires rotation and the other is linear. Both trigger some mechanism only once they're fully wound, and if left unwound, slowly return to their original positions. One type of door needs to be opened by some mechanism, while the other can swing freely, only resisting if obstructed by some other object, like a crate. These can serve as hard stops or dead ends, requiring clearing an area before progressing. Dispensers drop objects and are usually paired with an activation mechanism, like a button or switch. And depending on which item is dispensed, they can range from anything between dangerous to annoying. Broken elevator that always rises up unless pushed down by a weight or force. This can serve as a one-way path both vertically or horizontally. It could even fling objects around with some difficulty. Conveyor belts are fixed in place but push objects placed on top of them. They cause minor resistance to player movement but can carry hazardous objects. Fans produce a strong draft in one direction, forcing objects away or towards themselves. These can act as a trap or propel objects across based on which direction they're spinning. Trolleys can carry other objects on top of themselves and, depending on the cargo, also be dangerous. They offer a safe but challenging way of moving multiple objects. Though very video gamey, trampolines work well with the theme of movement by throwing objects around. These could be made more interesting with variable rotation and movement. And that's the test level sorted. This series is meant to be a peek into game design for people that might be interested but don't know how or where to start. My goal is to encourage people to play a variety of games, learn about them, and develop their own games. All project resources are free to download and use, commercially or otherwise. All code is commented, and I've included docs explaining how I set things up for development. I'm open to questions, suggestions, and criticisms. You can join on Discord for discussions, follow on Twitter for progress updates, donate on Ko-fi to help support this project. You can find all relevant links in the video description.